Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Grayson Hale steadied himself in the cockpit of the stealth ship, his eyes narrowing as Zalara, the distant alien world, filled his viewport. The glow of the planet's atmosphere shimmered in hues of emerald and copper, a stark contrast to the lifeless expanse of space around him. His hands, gloved in nanofiber mesh, gripped the controls with the precision of a man who had done this far too many times. Missions like these were supposed to get easier, predictable, almost routine. But every new world he infiltrated brought its own set of challenges, and Zalara was no different. The Unified Human Defense Council had briefed him in cold, pragmatic terms. Destabilize the Shrellian hierarchy, they'd said. The ruling class has become too aggressive, too powerful. The Shrellians, an ancient and technologically advanced race, had never seen humans as equals, until now. Grayson's mission wasn't just to break the back of their military but to shift an entire civilization's view of humanity. Alone, a sudden ping from his console brought him back to the present. Zalara's orbital defense grid had picked up a faint signal, though Grayson's stealth technology rendered his ship all but invisible to standard detection. The planetary security system was formidable, but Grayson had anticipated this. A quiet hum filled the cabin as he engaged a series of cloaking maneuvers. The ship slowed, slipping into the atmosphere without the usual fiery re-entry, a ghost among the clouds. As the craft descended, Grayson's gaze drifted to the image displayed on his dashboard. A photo of his family, taken years before the war that had claimed their lives in a Shrellian raid. He had been away, serving in a distant system when the attack occurred. That was the moment he swore vengeance, a quiet, simmering promise to himself that he would make the Shrellians pay for what they had done. The ship touched down in a barren section of Zalara's northern hemisphere. The landscape was rugged and desolate, a wasteland of jagged rocks and mineral deposits, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. It was the perfect place to land unseen. Grayson activated the ship's concealment protocols and stepped out into the dry air, his armor shifting subtly to blend into the landscape. The exosuit he wore was a marvel of human ingenuity, a lightweight, flexible armor that could adapt to its surroundings, much like the man who wore it. He checked his wrist-mounted holomap. The target zone, a sprawling industrial city known as Caravis, was 120 miles southeast. It would take hours to reach, but Grayson had time. This was a mission of precision, not speed. The ruling class sat safely in their orbital station, far removed from the struggles of their people, but the infrastructure that kept them in power was firmly rooted on the planet's surface. That was where Grayson would strike first. He set out, moving swiftly and silently across the rocky terrain. Each step was calculated, his mind already forming the intricate web of plans and contingencies. Grayson had been a soldier once, part of a unit, part of something larger than himself. But that had been years ago, before he realized that to win wars like these, one man had to do what entire armies could not. Hours passed as the landscape shifted from wasteland to industrial outskirts. Massive refineries loomed in the distance, their chimneys belching plumes of noxious smoke into the Zolarian sky. The city of Caravis was an imposing sight, a sprawl of metal and concrete, with towering structures that stretched far into the sky, connected by skybridges and transport lines. Shrellian guards, clad in black and silver armor, patrolled the perimeter, their weapons glinting under the artificial lights. Grayson crouched behind a ridge, studying the layout of the city. He was a master of infiltration, having spent years honing the art of stealth. His first target was the central communication tower, the nerve center of the city's defense grid. If he could disable it, the orbital station's connection to the planet would be severely compromised. The tower was heavily guarded, but Grayson wasn't worried. He had taken on worse odds before. With a silent command, his exosuit activated its chameleon mode, blending him into the rocky outcrop as he approached the tower. His movements were fluid, almost ghost-like, as he navigated the tight spaces between the guards' patrol routes. A Shrellian sentry passed mere inches from where Grayson hid, but the alien never saw him. Grayson slipped inside the tower's service hatch and began climbing the narrow access shaft. The hum of machinery filled the air as he ascended, his mind sharp and focused. There was no room for error. He reached the control room and paused, listening for signs of activity. The room was empty, as expected, but Grayson moved cautiously nonetheless. He approached the central terminal, his fingers working swiftly across the holographic interface. Within seconds, he had overridden the security protocols, bypassing the encryption with ease. The communications array blinked offline, and with it, the city's link to the orbital station. Grayson smiled grimly. The first step was complete. As he slipped back out into the night, the weight of the mission settled on him once again. This wasn't just about sabotage, it was about sending a message. The Shrellians thought they were untouchable, their position unassailable. They would learn that even a lone human could bring an empire to its knees. Grayson's mission had only just begun. Over the next several days, he moved like a shadow through the streets of Karavis, hitting key infrastructure points with surgical precision. A power grid here, a military supply depot there. Each strike was designed to weaken the Shrellian war machine, to sow confusion and disarray among their ranks. He never stayed in one place for long, always moving, always one step ahead of the Shrellian forces sent to track him down. Word of the mysterious human operative began to spread. The Shrellians had never encountered such a foe before, one who fought with such ruthless efficiency, yet remained unseen. Fear began to take hold, not just among the soldiers but among the ruling class itself. Grayson's actions had not gone unnoticed. In a high-security command center deep within the orbital station, High Commander Draziel paced before a massive holoscreen, his reptilian eyes narrowing as reports of the sabotage came in. His advisors hovered nearby, their expressions tense. Draziel was a formidable figure, his dark armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the command center. He was a strategist, a tactician, and he prided himself on being able to predict every move of his enemies, but this human, this lone wolf was different. Draziel clenched his fists, feeling the frustration mounting. He had underestimated humanity before, never again. Send the elite units to Karavis, Draziel commanded, his voice a low growl. I want this human captured, alive if possible. But if not, make sure he does not leave Zalara. Grayson moved quickly, his steps barely making a sound against the concrete as he slipped into the narrow alleys of Karavis. He'd been in situations like this before, alone, surrounded, and with no backup. It was the life he'd chosen, or perhaps it had chosen him. He thrived in the chaos, the uncertainty, and the thrill of being hunted. But this time was different. The Shrellian response was faster than anticipated. The moment the central communications tower went dark, they had mobilized their forces in a way that was both coordinated and aggressive. They had found his trail, too quickly for his liking. The streets were swarming with Shrellian soldiers, their silver-black armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Patrols marched in tight formations, their weapons drawn, scanning every shadow for signs of the intruder. Grayson blended into the darkness, his adaptive suit shifting its color to match the dull grays and blacks of the cityscape. Every movement had to be deliberate, precise. One wrong step, and he would be surrounded, but this wasn't the first time Grayson had outmaneuvered a superior force. He was a master of making his enemies play into his hands. His objective now was simple: sow further chaos before moving on to his next target. Every move he made was designed to cause more disruption, to create confusion among the ranks, and to stretch the Shrellian military thin. He had to keep them chasing ghosts while he dismantled their empire, piece by piece, that he turned a corner, slipping into the shadow of a tall industrial building. From his vantage point, he could see the Shrellian soldiers deploying in the distance, spreading out across the grid. They were moving fast, but not fast enough. Grayson activated a small, palm-sized device strapped to his wrist. A faint hum vibrated through the air as the signal jammer went live, sending out pulses that would interfere with their tracking systems. It wouldn't disable them entirely, but it would slow them down, make them second-guess their sensors. That was all he needed. He moved swiftly through the maze of alleyways, recalculating his approach with every step. His next target was a military supply depot located at the heart of the city, a central hub where weapons, fuel, and equipment were stored for quick deployment. If Grayson could disable or destroy it, the Shrellian forces would be crippled, unable to resupply their frontline units. Reaching the perimeter of the depot, Grayson crouched behind a rusted metal crate, surveying the area. The depot was heavily guarded, with multiple watchtowers and automated turrets scanning the grounds. Dozens of soldiers patrolled the exterior, while heavy transport vehicles moved in and out, carrying cargo crates filled with advanced weaponry. Taking it down would require more than just brute force. He needed to outthink them. Grayson watched the patterns of the guards, calculating their movements. Every patrol, every drone pass, every shift in their routine, it all became part of a mental map he created. He timed his move perfectly, slipping between patrols and avoiding detection as he made his way toward the depot's control building. His hands worked quickly, placing small charges at key structural points as he passed. The explosives were small but powerful, enough to take down critical components without leveling the entire area. His goal wasn't mass destruction, it was precision. By the time he reached the control room, he had already planted enough charges to cripple the depot. He entered the room, silent and invisible. The Shrellian officers inside had no idea they were being watched. Grayson moved to the main console, his fingers gliding over the holographic interface as he bypassed the security protocols. With a few swift commands, he shut down the automated defense systems, leaving the depot vulnerable. He activated a countdown on the charges, giving himself enough time to escape before the fireworks began. As he slipped back out into the night, he glanced at his wrist display, 2 minutes until detonation. He needed to be well clear by then. The clock ticked down as Grayson moved with purpose, keeping to the shadows. He was halfway down the block when the first explosion ripped through the depot. The ground shook beneath his feet, and a plume of smoke and fire billowed into the sky. Alarms blared as the Shrellian forces scrambled to respond, but it was too late. Grayson had already vanished, leaving behind a scene of chaos. His comm unit buzzed in his ear. It was a secure line, one he rarely used unless absolutely necessary. He tapped the side of his helmet, answering the call. A familiar voice crackled through the static. "Grayson, status update." It was Colonel Harrington, his handler back on Earth. Grayson hadn't spoken to him since the mission began. He didn't need supervision. But Harrington was old military, and he liked to check in on his operatives, even if it was more for his own peace of mind. "Depot's down," Grayson said quietly, moving deeper into the city. "Comms are still dark. Heading for extraction point." "Good. But listen, Intel suggests the Shrellians are bringing in reinforcements. High-level security forces. They know someone's here, and they're getting desperate. Grayson smirked. Let them come. I'm serious, Grayson. These aren't regular foot soldiers. They're sending their elite units. You need to stay sharp. Always am. The line went dead, and Grayson continued moving, his thoughts racing. The elite units meant High Commander Draziel wasn't just aware of his presence, he was actively hunting him. That made things interesting. Draziel was a legend among the Shrellian military, a brilliant tactician with a reputation for being ruthless. It was only a matter of time before the two of them crossed paths, and Grayson was looking forward to it. He reached the extraction point just as the Shrellian forces began to mobilize in force. The streets were filled with soldiers, transport vehicles, and armored units, all converging on the area he had just left. Grayson watched from a distance, his heart rate steady. He had bought himself some time, but not much. The orbital station was still his ultimate target, and every move he made brought him closer to dismantling the ruling class. Grayson activated his personal cloaking device and slipped away, moving toward the next phase of the mission. The city of Karavis would soon be in disarray, but his true challenge lay above, in the cold void of space, where Draziel and the Shrellian elites waited. This was no longer just a tactical operation, it was personal. Grayson had no intention of leaving Zalara without finishing what he started. The stars twinkled overhead as he approached the hidden transport vessel that would take him to the orbital station. Grayson's mind was sharp, focused. He had fought battles on countless worlds, faced enemies far more dangerous than the Shrellians, but this was different. This mission was a statement, not just to the Shrellians but to every alien race that had ever underestimated humanity. He boarded the transport, the soft hum of the engines vibrating through the deck as the ship lifted off. The station loomed in the distance, a colossal structure of steel and glass, orbiting high above the planet's surface. It was there, in the heart of the Shrellian Empire, that Grayson would deliver his final blow. As the transport approached, Grayson steeled himself for the final phase. His body was tired, but his mind was clear. The ruling class believed they were untouchable, hidden behind layers of security and technology. Grayson would show them just how wrong they were. The transport docked with the station, and Grayson moved swiftly, slipping through the corridors like a ghost. The station's security was formidable, but Grayson had spent weeks studying the layouts, memorizing every corridor, every exit. He knew exactly where he was going and how to get there without being detected. He reached the command center, where the Shrellian ruling class resided. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, and Grayson stepped inside. The rulers sat around a large table, their expressions calm and composed, unaware of the danger that had just walked into their midst. Grayson wasted no time. His hands moved quickly, disabling the station's life support systems and activating the lockdown protocols. The rulers panicked, their calm demeanor shattering as they realized what was happening. They were trapped, with no way to call for help. Grayson stood in the center of the room, his eyes cold and unyielding. "Your time is over," he said quietly. The rulers begged for mercy, offering wealth, power, anything they thought would sway him. But Grayson wasn't interested in their bribes. He had come to deliver a message that humanity was not to be underestimated. The station's alarms blared, and Grayson turned to leave. As he stepped through the doorway, he glanced back one last time. The rulers were cowering, helpless and afraid. They had believed themselves invincible, but in the end, they were nothing more than cowards hiding behind their technology. Grayson left the station in flames, the fire of its collapse lighting the sky as his ship soared back toward the stars. His mission was complete. He had dismantled the Shrellian Empire, piece by piece, and shown the galaxy the true power of humanity. As he disappeared into the void, Grayson knew that his work was far from over. There would always be another mission, another enemy, another fight. But for now, he had won. He had become the lone wolf, the one-man army that could bring an empire to its knees, and the galaxy would never forget his name.